So all you really have to do is have the courage to say, okay, I'm ready to take responsibility as the creator of my life experience, and I'm ready to heal. Let's go. Okay. Now, piece by piece, layer by layer, emotion by emotion, event by event, as you have called that in, you've asked for it, you're going to start to now be shown the pathway back to your integration, back to your healing. And so, moment by moment, as you are presented with those opportunities, you're just simply responding to them as they come. So, in that way, it can be a very, I won't say challenging process. That's not challenging, of course, but it will be a experience at a pace that you can actually integrate it.
Hello, Zach. Thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm really excited to have this conversation. I really enjoyed our last conversation. So first question that I have to everybody when they join is, what is something that at some point felt impossible for you and now is your new normal?
Ooh, we're getting started big. Something that felt impossible, but is now my new normal. I would say it's an increasing embodiment of an acceptance of what my purpose is. Whereas previously there was less acceptance and I'd say readiness, less owning of that. And so now claiming, it's an embrace, it's an acceptance of the claiming of what my purpose is, which is to help raise the consciousness of the collective at this time, play my role in that process, and to do so as a self-mastery coach to help people master their self-sabotage, the ways in which they are expressing unconscious behaviors, emotions, emotional patterns, thought patterns, in essence, not expressing their highest potential. And so as I continue on this journey of doing this myself, it's a continuous embracing of that for myself.
What was the resistance? Did you have any, what was it that got in your way of accepting it?
What stood in the way of accepting that was the lack of following that own process in my own life. You see, because you can only take someone as far as you have taken yourself. And so the degree to which I had experienced my own transformation was the degree to which I was ready, willing, and ready to accept that purpose for myself. So when I was still, in other words, when I was still holding on to different ways of being, different ways of conditioning, I was still not ready to accept that.
I could see that. So that's a really, really good insight. So with that, what helps to, because I'm sure that there's people listening that they might be in a place where they know that there's some things that I need to let go. There's some things that for me to go to that next, or the way I am, or the way I live, or decisions I make, they might not be aligned with that next thing. What is it that has helped you or people that you have worked with to actually, I don't want to say it make it easy or seamless, but maybe simplify or make it seem easier to do that?
Easier to move
So
through
pretty
that
much like
process?
move to that like transition, because there is, well, maybe before we go into there, like what is it that needs to happen or needed to happen for you to be able to go from where you were to being in that place where you are now?
It was a doubling down on my own inner work. It's a doubling down on the choice to be courageous, to express what you came here to express, to be who you came here to be. I often say this to my coaching clients, because most of them are coaches. And so what I often tell them is that if you're a coach, if you're here to be a coach, then you have to recognize that you are your most highest priority client right now. You are your highest priority client. You have to coach yourself. You have to see yourself as your own client. And so when you start to see yourself in that way, you start to, I think, take on more self-honesty, and you start to look at, okay, well, what is it within myself that is still needing integration so that I can just do what I do at a higher level? And so it's like looking at that. It's enhanced self-honesty, looking at that. What is it within myself that is still asking for integration, asking for self-love, asking for attention? Um, and the more I committed to that, the more I was able to embody my truth.
You mentioned courage. How would you define it?
Responsibility.
Mm.
The courage, I see courage as one's willingness to stop denying,
Mm.
to affirm reality, to accept what reality is as opposed to denying what reality is. That takes courage. That's the end of victimhood. It's the beginning of self-responsibility.
How do you with that reality? Because I think in some ways we live in different realities. There's one reality that you think you're living in, and then there's another real reality. How can you identify, or is there anything that can help to identify which reality am I actually focusing on? What's real? What's not real? Because then with that, I think with willing to stop denying it, I think good first step is to identify which reality I'm actually like. Am I actually looking at real reality, or am I living in another reality that is just in my mind, or it might be like I have glasses on?
Yeah.
How to distinguish then more? Is there something that can help?
So what I mean when I say reality is your own personal subjective reality.
Okay.
Let's take a behavioral pattern, for example, something that is impacting you in a negative way. It's sabotaging your health, your happiness, your joy, your progress. If you're carrying out an unconscious behavioral pattern in that way, that's part of your personal reality. And when you're unwilling to accept that you are creating that, you're unwilling to accept your own personal reality, that you are creating your reality.
That is actually one thing that I wrote down from your content. The quote that you had, the sooner you accept that you're created your reality, the sooner you can create a new one.
Mm.
Question with that I have, what gets in a way of accepting that you have created it?
Well, it's fear ultimately. Um, Ultimately, it comes down to making choices. All we're doing all day long throughout our life is endlessly making choices. Everything is a choice. From something as simple and routine as brushing your teeth or making a meal to changing a relationship or starting a new business and everything in between, all of it just represents choices. Most of our choices that we make are unconscious. Far fewer are conscious. And so when you realize that you're already making choices, and the choices that are sabotaging your health, happiness, joy, and progress are unconscious, all it takes is ownership. And so we go back to the level of courage, the consciousness level of courage, which is emotionally to affirm, to accept reality, to see it and not deny it. And that is the ending of, we're using the word denial. Denial is just fear. It's another way of fear expressing. And so when we say, okay, I'm willing to accept and take responsibility for the fact that I'm the one variable in my own life, I'm the common denominator. I'm willing to actually acknowledge that. It's always been that way. And now I'm willing. It's a willingness. I choose to acknowledge that. I choose to. And if we want to go a layer deeper, well, why would one choose that versus continuously denying that? Is because I have to get to a place in which I value my freedom. I value truth. I value that over valuing the fear. And so I see it as a values shift ultimately. What am I valuing? Yes, it may have been hard to get to this point of acknowledging this reality. It's still hard, but I value my freedom. I value progress more than I value the fear. So it's not as though the fear disappears. It's that I become now more resourceful and stronger to move through that fear.
I'm curious because it's really profound when you start to, and I have experienced it where I rather get the truth, or let's say a good example is friendships. I rather have somebody tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. Even though the first option doesn't really feel as good, probably feels way less good than the other option. Um, because the other option could reaffirm certain things about me that I'm like, oh, like um I can now kind of justify things, or I don't have to keep myself accountable, or, that kind of stuff. But there's something about having that, whether it's external accountability or next level probably might be the internal accountability where you can keep yourself accountable, but being able to tell yourself truth or have somebody around you that can call you out, because a lot of times we have blind spots where you might not see stuff. So it's valuable to have people that can call them out. But with that, and I might be wrong, but I think it's not as common that we actually seek it out intentionally. That truth for it's like, tell me the truth. And I literally just had a call with somebody, and at the end of I was invited to a group, and he asked me like, how was the group? Tell me the truth. Because I was like, okay, you asked for the truth. Here you go. And I was able to, I had that space to actually share. Because I think it's also when it comes to sharing, it can depend on the where the person is and whether they are ready to receive. Because sometimes the truth can hurt them or shut them down, where it's not actually helping them. So with that, what can, let's say somebody is listening and they might identify that they're maybe in a group that is more like, let's reaffirm each other's shit. How can they identify, or what can help to actually start seeking out the truth? Because I think it's easier said than done, because a lot of times one thing is that you know it and you kind of try to hide it. Something else is when somebody says it or you actually acknowledge it, and then it's like, it's out. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so what was that question there?
So what can help to actually start doing that or go into that process? Because I think as I'm thinking about my journey, I kind of had support through like mentors who would, not in some mentors, not in so nice ways, introduce me to the concept, but I learned to appreciate it, and I was in good enough place to receive it and not be like offended. But
Mm-hmm.
what can help to actually initiate that process? Because it's really unfamiliar. There can come negative emotions with it. You might get
Mm-hmm.
triggered. How to
Mm-hmm.
navigate it?
Mm-mm-mm. Yeah. I heard someone say the other day that shadow work is warfare. And so let's look again at the level of courage. When we're accepting responsibility for being the creator of how we experience our life, it requires the continuous commitment to that level of courage, because that courage and that commitment will be tested. So I see it as something that one says they have this, let's say maybe they have some kind of epiphany and insight and awakening. They go, oh, I see I am the common denominator in my own life. Now, that awareness will be tested. So as I am continuously confronted with emotions, emotional triggers, and so on, all I have to do is continuously respond to that emotional trigger as a challenge to accept. So I want to say that acceptance is the kryptonite to the ego. It's the one response to the ego that the ego will always surrender to. And so the question becomes, how committed are you to continuously responding to triggers with acceptance?
Okay, so can we first talk through the trigger? What is a trigger? And for people listening, are there ways to identify it?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. Well, a trigger can be any way in which you perceive unconsciously. A trigger is simply a label that describes unconscious perception. Okay. With each, and there's a myriad of ways in which someone can perceive unconsciously. So, regardless of the way in which you are perceiving unconsciously, it will be associated with a specific emotion: fear, anger, pride, guilt, shame, apathy, desire, and so on. And so, whenever you're in that state of being, and that you say, oh, this is a familiar trigger, it's a familiar emotional pattern, you are in a triggered state of consciousness. And so, that you've been triggered into unconsciousness. It's an unconscious state of being, and that's a triggered state. And
So it's
so,
kind of like your consciousness now is within the unconsciousness.
yeah.
Okay.
And so now your emotional conditioning has hijacked your consciousness, and you've gone unconscious. And now your emotional patterning is what is doing the expressing and behaving. So the next part of your question is, if that's what a trigger is, and that's the state that a trigger expresses as, whatever it is for you, that's all you have to do is become aware that that's what a triggered state is for you. And that's how you can spot a trigger.
Yeah, it's something that I like to ask about triggers, because it's one thing that if you have experienced, if you're at a level of awareness where you can identify them, it's one thing. But if you're like, trigger, what is a trigger? What does it look like? What does it feel like? It's really, for me also, it's interesting to hear how you can explain it, how you can put it in perspective, so that it is easier to identify them. Because it's kind of like, a lot of times it is that you get triggered and you just automatically respond, whatever is that response. But then being able to catch it, you need to have awareness. And it's like, how do you get to that point where you're able to even like identify that, like, what is a trigger? And it's like, how to pretty much like how to bring it from the concept to actually something that you can identify within yourself, within your life. The question I had there as well is, with triggers being like you described it as a challenge, I like to describe them as a gift that you can unwrap, and there's usually something that it's like, oh, let's work on this. How to process triggers, or how to actually find what's in it, or kind of get the information out of it that might be valuable for you, or using your term, like to find or identify what's the challenge within it.
That's a great question. And I love what you said about seeing it as a gift. That perspective comes through a higher level of consciousness. When we're in a lower level of consciousness, the last thing we want to accept or consider is that this thing that's triggering me is a gift somehow. How could this be a gift? This is causing my pain. So to just get to that level of understanding is a massive leap in consciousness. And oftentimes, what these triggers are made of, where they come from, at what age did I learn this, where's the wound, all of this kind of who, what, when, where, why, is usually very mysterious to someone. They want to know, when did this start? What's this about? And the good news is that we don't actually have to really go down that rabbit hole. We can, and it's helpful sometimes to have conscious level insight. Oh, this started when I was 2 or 3, or this was the trauma. But all you need to actually transmute that trigger, that darkness, and turn it into light, which is really acceptance and forgiveness, is to follow the trigger down its own rabbit hole. So it has all the information that you need in order to change it. So, for example, if it's anger, that's all you really need to be aware of to begin to make change. I'm feeling anger. Okay, now, can I take responsibility for being the one that is producing this anger in this moment? Yes, it may have been, the button may have been pushed by that individual and what just happened, but my state of being, my emotions, my thoughts, my behavior is coming from me. So as long as I can just accept that I'm dealing with a pattern of anger in this example, all of a sudden right there, I can begin to release it. Now, as I begin to release it, you open Pandora's box. As you begin to release it, the unconscious begins to open and provide more detail of what that trigger consists of. And you start to have greater conscious insight and awareness of that detail.
I'm thinking which question to go with first. I think it might be valuable with what you said with taking responsibility of producing the anger. What did you say to somebody who says like, I didn't produce it. You said the mean thing. You got me angry.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say to them, or how to navigate it, or what can be perspective shift there, or what can help to shift that perspective to where you do see that I'm the one that produced the anger?
Well, I find that questions are really the best way uh, to navigate especially a challenging conversation where someone's already defensive. Instead of me telling you what is, I might ask questions. So, am I in control of your emotions? Do I control your emotions? Now, even someone who's in a state like that doesn't want to accept that someone else controls them in terms of their emotions. Most people in that moment are go, well, yeah, fair enough. Even if they're angry, it's like, I don't control your emotions. And so it's just a simple question that kind of jogs that inward, that introspection. Yeah, fair. Okay. And so it starts to at least plant that seed of, well, that's true. And if it goes any further than that for them, great. If it doesn't, that's equally as great. That's okay. I'm not here to change them. And it may not even lead to that questioning. It may just end where it end where it is, and just me accepting and allowing that individual to have their emotion, have their trigger. Because I think the way in which you respond to it will depend on the readiness of the individual. So, for example,
Like you respond to somebody being triggered.
yeah, I
Okay.
used to react to another person's trigger and take that as an opportunity to argue. And I'm going to debate now. We're going to debate.
Yeah.
Now, all that would happen was that I would get triggered, right?
Yep.
Because the debate comes from a trigger. And so I would just get angry.
Yep.
So, so what I realized in doing, again, taking responsibility for this is I just go, okay, that's fine. That person doesn't need to go any further than they want to. That's completely okay.
um, Interesting question, because as you were talking about that producing anger, the way I usually describe it or experience it if I'm being triggered, again, way different than some years ago. But now when I experience it, it's more so, of course, depending on the person that I'm talking to. If I feel like there's somebody who can hold the space to talk it through, I'll be like, what you just said got me triggered. That's what I usually, the way I communicate it. I don't necessarily see it as like, I produced this emotion. I feel like that was initial trigger that produced me to feel certain way. But is there like another layer to it that I'm the one that produced that emotion? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's that we're producing it unconsciously.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
So the source of it is still within. It's just that it's an
I
unconscious.
didn't do it
That's why it's so
consciously.
automatic and reactive.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Um, and then with the uh, let me see where I want to go. Okay, with that leap of consciousness, because like when I asked you a question, you said that it shows like certain leap of consciousness. What is it that determines the leaps of consciousness or the level of consciousness that you're at?
How does one produce their level of consciousness in any moment?
Or how do you, what does, let me think, what does, how do you measure it? What is it that affects, like, okay, one person is at this level, one person is at this, like what is different between
Yeah.
these two people?
Yeah. Think of consciousness as really just your current state of being, emotional state of being. So if you are in a state of, let's say, love, then you could say that your level of consciousness in that moment is love. Yeah. What
But
was the
does
next part
it,
of that question?
okay, then with that the question is, how does that level determine your ability to like understand, let's say example with triggers, where one person might see it as, I don't ever want to happen, I hate when it happens, where somebody else might see it as a gift. Like what does level of consciousness, what role does it play there?
Well, you're only perceiving the level of consciousness that you are. Like we're
Hmm.
only perceiving our own vibration. And so from a lower level of consciousness, if one is in a lower level, they're not going to be able to perceive their state of being as something that they're creating by virtue of the level that they're at, because lower levels of consciousness, that range goes from shame to pride.
Hmm.
Once we go beyond pride, we go into courage. That's the first level of empowerment. Excuse me, power, which is empowerment. That level of courage is empowerment. So we've got power and we've got force. And levels of force are simply levels of less consciousness. That's all it is, less consciousness. And in those levels of force, these are degrees of the perspective of being a victim. And so if one's in a level of force, they perceive themselves in some way to be a victim of their external world. And so they don't see themselves at cause for how they're
Ah.
experiencing the world, how they're experiencing it. So basically, in a level of force, you will perceive yourself as a victim and you'll be less likely to take responsibility for that trigger.
with with triggers, I actually had like one interesting comment, because there's like one lady that I worked with where she was like, I always get angry to my fiance, and like everybody makes me angry. And I remember we were talking and I'm like, okay, so within the conversations that we have had, have you ever gotten angry? Or like you're literally feeling like rage or like anger towards me? And she was like, no. And I'm like, well, one thing that I have learned is a lot of times it takes one person, where like if somebody is expressing their emotions and I'm able to hold space for that instead of whatever they say, which is not always is nice things, if that triggers me and I respond back, now I mean I'm just having like we're fighting. It's trigger exchange kind of thing,
Mhm.
and we just go
Yeah.
down that road. But it's something that I had like really interesting thought on, of how powerful it is to be able to, and I think big part of it also, big role in that is playing your comfort levels with your own emotions, which I can't say I'm super comfortable with all my emotions, but I'm definitely in a much better place where the more comfortable I am with myself and my emotions, the more I feel like I can hold space for somebody to express their emotions, or I'm able to identify that if they say something, I get triggered, but I don't take it personally. I'm able to still hold that space. Um, how to, Well, one question there would be how to navigate these, uh, and I think those are really typical in relationships because that's where you're the most vulnerable, you can be triggered the most, and you can have
Mhm.
the most gifts shown to you. Um, how to navigate the triggers or certain emotions that come up, especially with the closest people in our lives.
Well, if we can commit to recognizing these closest people, our loved ones, as our greatest teachers, then it helps us to remember that every time we're triggered, we're being presented with another teaching opportunity. Right? I just see it as a more of a choice to continuously remember. Because when we go unconscious, what we're doing is we're forgetting. We're forgetting the truth in that moment. We're going into a state of hypnosis. It's a hypnotic trance that's induced by emotion. And so the more we can remember that what is happening right now is for my highest good, then instantaneously, if I choose to remember that, I can shift my response to it.
What helps to remember it when you're in a place where you just keep getting triggered, everything is going wrong? Because I think it's easy to do it when like everything is going smoothly, have like one tiny trigger, it's like, oh, remember. What
Yeah.
happens when we are already emotionally stretched? Maybe we didn't sleep well, maybe we have period when we're like really challenged. How to navigate it then?
Well, there's a number of ways. Um, you can take out time for yourself, right? Let's say, for example, you're really triggered and it's with your spouse and you're really heated and you know that you can't really communicate effectively because what's going to come out is just going to be more trigger and it's just going to magnify the situation. And so you can say, okay, well, I need to at least take a pause and go into a separate room and do some breathing, just some calm, close my eyes, bring back some calm into my nervous system. If you know a rapid change technique, you can use a modality to release some of that emotion and stress in that moment. So there's any number of things that you can do, but I think at the core of whatever you're going to do, it's just going to be to break that state, to just give yourself some peace in that moment. Release the momentum of the emotional energy. And so if you need to step outside, if you need to go take a deep breath, if you need to do some energy release, and the more that you do that, the more natural it's going to be for you to respond to those events in those ways. It'll just become easier. Oh, yep, it's really heated. I've done this so many times, I know what to do.
So with that, you mentioned momentum of emotional energy. Is it, let's say there's anger, so if you take a step back, then you can get that momentum like stopping or not taking off? Or what was the, because I really like, I haven't heard of it, like momentum of emotional energy.
Yeah, it is a momentum. So the more that you stay in a state, the stronger the state gets. So the sooner, that's why they say prevention is the best medicine.
Hmm.
Ideally, if you're doing the work on yourself, you're preventing or you're doing this work proactively. Now, because life is always happening and you're always going to be surprised, you will encounter those triggers. Um, but just understand that the sooner I can break the state or reduce that momentum is the sooner I can go back to a state of empowerment.
On prevention, what if somebody tells you like, well, the easiest way to prevent is to isolate? Why not just do that? How to know, like, how to know how, it's something that I was thinking a lot about, how to know how well integrated you are with your like self growth, self development, because I think it's easier to feel like you're progressing when you're in a
Mhm.
situation or environment that doesn't really trigger you, doesn't really challenge you as much, versus if you're in a, I think good example is, I had one of mentors tell me that if you want to see how healed or developed you are, go spend time with your family. It's kind of like, I think a lot of times we can get to that conclusion that, well, for me to be less triggered, I can just fully control environment, remove anything that could trigger me, and see it
Yeah.
as like that's the path to go, which
Yeah.
it can work, but it has so many limits to it. And yeah, I don't know if there's a question, but maybe you have some comment on it.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to understand that if you're doing that, you're doing so out of fear. You're doing so because you want to um, protect yourself. And so all you're doing in self isolation, and by the way, there may be periods where isolation is called for, but if you are remaining in isolation, it's because of fear, and all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. What we resist persists. And so while it may feel as though it's a short term fix, because that core wound, that trauma, whatever's underlying that trigger is still there, more than likely what's going to happen is that when you do inevitably encounter that trigger again, it will come back stronger, harder, because you haven't been confronting it. It's like an atrophied muscle. If you don't use that muscle, the next time you go to use it, you're going to feel weaker. The muscle's not going to perform as you want it to.
So let's say we have somebody who has been isolating, or they have been really controlling their environment, but they see that it's limiting them. What would be the place to start? Because as you said, like if you start similar to gym, like if you try to run marathon day one, you might do it, but you might die.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great example. So it's like you've never ran a marathon, and then all of a sudden you decide you're going to. Well, you haven't primed yourself. You haven't prepared your body, your system to be able uh to execute, to perform at that level. And so if you go from a period of isolation, you go, okay, now I want to go and confront my demons, and I want to grow. Well, how can you now confront that within, let's say, your isolation? Can you, while remaining physically isolated, decide to look at mentally and emotionally what you haven't been? Because when we're isolating, one can isolate being out in public. So yes, isolation is also physical, but let's say you've been physically isolating. You say, okay, now I want to go and return to civilization. Okay, well, now let's help prepare myself, my mind and body, my nervous system, by doing some shadow work, some inner work while I'm still here in the comfort of my home. And then as you naturally, what's going to happen is you're going to start to feel more empowered. You're going to start to feel more energized. And then it's going to feel natural, more natural, to bring yourself physically out of isolation.
With that, not isolation alone, but I'm pretty sure there's many situations or many people going through life experiences where they have been, especially I think people who have gone through a lot of traumatic experiences, where they're in this state of having a lot of pain and they want to get out of it now. How to navigate that? It can be a season, it can be longer than a season, but how to navigate it then? Because many times it can be a process, and like using marathon analogy, you don't finish it day one. You train up to it where you're able to do it. Is that something that can apply to healing and getting out of that painful state, or is there like a shortcut?
Well, there are ways of accelerating your growth and healing, but I believe that your unconscious will only give you as much as you're ready to integrate, as much as you're ready to face. So, if someone wants to do this, but they don't have experience, or they have a lot of fear, then what I can say is that you will be able to handle what you are given. Your unconscious will only, like, no matter how much you want to grow or how fast, you will only grow at the pace at which you can actually handle. Because if you can't handle it, you're not growing. You're like re-traumatizing yourself. So all you really have to do is have the courage to say, okay, I'm ready to take responsibility as the creator of my life experience, and I'm ready to heal. Let's go. Okay. Now, piece by piece, layer by layer, emotion by emotion, event by event, as you have called that in, you've asked for it, you're going to start to now be shown the pathway back to your integration, back to your healing. And so, moment by moment, as you are presented with those opportunities, you're just simply responding to them as they come. So, in that way, it can be a very, I won't say challenging process. That's not challenging, of course, but it will be a experienced at a pace that you can actually integrate it.
What's the role of patience in this?
Everything. Patience is that's the role. Everything.
And how
it, it
how to stay patient, especially, and this is something that I think it doesn't apply just to being in pain, but in general, like when you do the thing you are supposed to do, you do it consistently, you don't see results today, you don't see it tomorrow, you might not see it like really clearly even after a year. And
mhm,
how to keep going, or do you have any advice with that, staying patient and trusting the
mhm,
process?
mhm. Yeah, it's a great question. I would use that as an opportunity to recognize that the way in which I've been judging my own growth is itself something that I can surrender, because it's super common for people that are on these pathways to not fully recognize how much they've grown. And so I think it's a opportunity to just practice humility and say, well, maybe I'm judging my own rate of growth based on my own expectations that I've set, and those expectations themselves may be distorting my perception of my growth. So I can simply let go and trust. It's about falling back into trust that I'm growing at the pace that is appropriate for me, and I can let go of that self judgment that I'm placing upon myself as I'm walking that journey.
I feel like it's easier said than done. Like how to do it, because it's like, oh yeah, sure, makes sense. But then it's like, I want to grow faster. Like I don't have that much time, and like all
Hmm.
these expectations. And it's also a question with that is um expectations versus standards. Because I think one thing that I noticed is this pattern of setting unrealistic expectations. You don't meet them, and now you beat yourself up. It's like self-fulfilling prophecy of super high expectations. I don't meet them, and because I don't meet them, I beat myself up, and I tell all these stories about myself of I'm this, I'm that, and then it's like, but I need to do it again, and then you kind of do it, and you're in that loop of, in some ways, self-sabotage. You probably might still get better, but energy behind it is not ideal. But navigating that, judging your own growth, it's is there a way to, I know that compassion probably plays a big role there, but how to navigate that, if you have this standard, you have this vision for yourself, and you're not there yet, and a lot of times we expect or we think that we progress like this. It's not like we and yeah, it's, I don't know if there's a question there, but it's something that I know that could be an objection of like, yeah, I understand the concept, but I do want to grow. I do want to get to that level. And sometimes they might, like, you might even think like, I actually do think that I could get there, but I'm not there yet. And I'm so far. I'm at the very big, like at the very bottom of the mountain that I want to climb.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, see it again as a practice in acceptance. Okay, I'm at the bottom of the mountain. So can I accept that, or will I judge it? The sooner you accept where you are is the sooner that you become empowered. So, you said, well, it's easier said than done. And I get that that's a concept. And so maybe I only understand it intellectually.
Hmm.
Action is the highest form of behavior. To truly know something is to be it. When it's in your body, when it's in your behavior, then it's knowing. Until that point, it's hearsay. You've heard it. Sounds good. I like it. And so with that understanding, you say, well, until I know it, until I'm being it, I don't yet know it. And so I can accept that. Again, I'm being we said back to shadow work can be warfare. Well, then what I'm doing is being a soldier. I'm soldiering on. I'm mustering up the energy of the soldier that just goes forward. Yep, it's scary. Yep, I'm doubting myself. Yep, I'm judging. Yep, I've heard that's true, but I don't fully know it. Okay, well, then I've got to coach myself. I've got to call myself out and go, I'll do it until it's obvious, until it's self evident.
Actually, one accepting that I don't know it is something that I think big thing that has helped me is I heard a quote or saying of some person telling that they learned from their mentor that if I'm not where I want to be, I haven't done what I need to do long enough, or I haven't found the right way to do it. But it doesn't mean anything about me. And I think a lot of times what we do is it's kind of like adding that meaning of what does this mean about me? I'm not there yet. So what it means about me is, and then we have a list of stories about ourselves. Um, with that, I do you have any advice on how to maybe separate that where I am from or where I am in this journey of how I see myself, how I perceive myself, or how do I value myself?
All of this comes back to loving yourself. And so if I'm perceiving where I am in such a way that leads to my own self judgment, then that is pointing to a pattern of unconsciousness within me. In other words, I'm triggered by how I perceive myself.
Yeah.
And if I keep it as simple as this is an aspect or an element within myself that is of non love, then it's simply an opportunity to love and accept myself, to accept where I am. Great. I'm at the very beginning. Awesome. I got so much room to grow.
What is self love? How would you define it? How would you describe it?
I would describe it as full and complete acceptance. Acceptance to the point that you fully embrace who and what you are, no matter where you are, no matter what condition you find yourself in, no matter what others may say about you, what their opinions are, no matter how different you may see yourself or you may see others as you, that you fully embrace yourself.
Ooh, that's a powerful place to be. What helps to get there? If somebody is in a place where they literally are like, I hate myself. Forget about
Mhm.
liking, for better for or
Mhm.
loving. I don't even like myself. I hate myself.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, everything that we believe to be true, whether it's about ourselves or otherwise, has been learned. And anything that is of non love is of falsehood. It's simply not true. And so, if I can somehow learn that, as we are right now on this podcast, that anything that is non love is falsehood, it's not true, regardless of how much I may have learned to hate myself. And regardless of how much in my past I can point to as seeming evidence that that is true, it's all been learned. It's not intrinsic to my soul, my spiritual nature. Therefore, it can be unlearned. And we just go back to, Ashra, what you said, which is it's all gifts. If I have yet to learn to love myself, then everything that stands in between me and that recognition of self love is just a gift helping me get there.
What if that you said non love is not true, but what if that non love feels true? In that moment, as they're sitting in their
Yeah.
room listening this, they're like, but it feels true.
Yeah. Good question. Well, what sensations am I relying upon? Have I learned to rely upon to indicate to me what is truth? And what we're going to look at is the five senses when I'm describing those senses. Those are senses that we, as spiritual beings having a human experience, have learned over time to listen to value as an indication of truth. Oh, if I can feel it, if I can sense it, see it, hear it, feel it, then that is what's true. And then we wind up saying, well, I won't believe it until I see it. And the reverse is true. When I believe it, that's when I'll see it. And so it becomes a process of learning to not place all of our reliance upon our five senses, but rather have those five senses be an element of our human experience, but not being the entire truth. There's so much more to reality than what we can pick up with our five senses. So even though it may feel this way, and I can hear the inner dialogue and so on and so forth, if I can release that trauma, because that's what that belief in the five senses comes from. That's what that belief in I hate myself and that's true. It comes from trauma. So as long as I can release the emotional energy, as long as I can release that, what's going to happen is I'm going to start to realize more truth, layer by layer, emotion by emotion, release by release.
Something that I wrote down that I got to this one conclusion. I was a lot of times I was thinking like, why do people open up to me? Why do they trust me? Even like since I was a teenager, people would share their stuff with me that they haven't told people. And then I started to also see that even like within myself, how judgment versus curiosity. When you're judging, there's no safe space. You really limit yourself and you add like negativity on top of it. But when you're curious, you instantly remove judgment because there's no place for judgment. It's kind of like the way I describe it is it's when I'm talking to somebody, when I'm in place of judgment, it's like good, bad kind of thing. When I'm in a place of curiosity, I'm a blank page and I'm just gathering data. I'm gathering information. And then based on that information, that's when I can get better judgment, but that judgment is more educated because I now have information and I'm like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. And if I don't, I probably will have follow-up questions so that I can get better understanding instead of like, yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's right. And that's the moment when we can shut down. And we do the same thing with ourselves when we judge ourselves instead of being curious. I wonder why I did that. I wonder why I feel that. And to your point, we don't always get the answers, but at least we can be curious to some capacity and try to find some answers, or at the very least be open to feeling, which is another question that I wanted to ask you is how to feel. Because I think a lot of the times we have these it's one thing that I actually caught myself. I remember when I was quite young. Um, I I had my parents. I think they were. I had like some papers in my bag or something like that. So they were pretty much like being like strict with me and like kind of giving me my lecture. And I remember I felt anger and I instantly got rid of it and I went to sadness. And I had this like thought, I'm not allowed to be angry. It's kind of like I'm the peacemaker. I can't be angry. So anger is not the allowed emotion. And with that, for that kind of where I'm heading with this question is that for me it became like automatic response. It's not even, oh, I'm angry, let's feel anger. It was automatically just like it's automatically let's just go away. Sadness. And the question there would be how to, one, maybe identify what's the emotion you actually feel, or what is the emotion that might be like provoked or within that interaction. And then maybe after that, depending on how lengthy is the answer, how to actually feel feelings.
Yeah, these are great questions and they really connect to one another. That moment in which you felt anger and then repressed it and decided that it was safer to feel sadness, as you said, let's say could have come from something within it's something within the consciousness where we just kind of learn through life experience that it's unsafe to feel this emotion. And so you just learned that it was safer to feel this emotion because the unconscious is only doing what it feels to be the safest in
I
any
think
given
in
moment.
I felt it's more, maybe it was related to safety as well, but I think it was more like it's not allowed kind of
That's what
thing.
I'm saying.
Oh, okay, yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I'm
okay.
saying. So if this
So it
is
wasn't
not
safe to
allowed,
feel. Okay, yeah, got it.
so if I express that which is not allowed, then I could be putting myself
Oh,
at greater
yeah,
risk.
got it.
So therefore, I'll do something that is allowed. I know this is allowed here. And uh, now, about how do we feel again, it would be to say, you know what, it is actually safe to feel this emotion. In this moment, if it's anger, then it's anger. I'm going to allow myself to feel this instead of repressing it. If I think it's unsafe, if I've been taught that it's unsafe, that's going back down for me to feel later. But if I keep repressing it, I won't really allow it to move through. And so it's just like I can allow there's nothing wrong with experiencing force. I want to make that distinction very clear. There's nothing wrong with experiencing any emotion. Shame, guilt, fear, anger. There's nothing wrong with it. We came here to have the human emotional experience. And so we want to just learn to embrace whatever emotion is moving through us so that we can allow it to move through us and not get stuck in us. And as we do that, we start to form greater compassion with ourselves and start to live more from a heart-centered consciousness and open up a wider range of our ability to feel, not just the lower, but everything.
Uh, Follow-up question on the we can use that example that I had with anger. How to identify if sadness is the emotion that, let's say, I actually was feeling versus it actually was anger, but I just suppressed it. Is there a way to identify that I'm currently suppressing emotions?
Yeah, if you are feeling, so there will be some subtle expression of the emotion depending on how intense the emotion is in that moment. And if you're resisting it, if you're choosing to stay in it and dig your heels into the position of that emotion, I'm justified in feeling this anger. You're my enemy, and I'm going to stay here until you agree with it. You take responsibility, right? Okay, so that all we're doing is teaching ourselves more anger. So we're making it stronger. And so if you're noticing, you're just becoming more conscious, you're choosing to notice that emotion more, you'll recognize that there is an emotion there. You'll recognize what it is because you're choosing to. I want to make that clear. It's because you're choosing to. You're saying, oh, there's an emotion here. I'm not ignoring it. I'm not repressing it. What is this? How do I feel? Like you're asking, you're coaching yourself. And as you're simply asking that question, your unconscious is listening and it's going to provide you with more insight as to what it is because you're choosing to understand. The choice to understand indicates more safety. In other words, I'm saying, I feel safe in learning more about what this is. Show it to me.
I had a question on feeling versus expressing. Can you feel the emotion without expressing it?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that's something that um, I think a lot of times it's something I think I have experienced where I feel a lot of emotions, but I don't always express them. I kind of, it's what you're saying, I allow them to go through me. Sometimes I need to express even like through crying or, things like that. But I find it really interesting that um, I would engage with people where they say, like, I'm emotionally closed off. I don't know if that's just that like interaction or it's based on like the level of consciousness, but that's where I was curious of, is it possible to feel emotions without expressing them? And is, and with that, maybe follow up question there, is expressing them not beneficial or not beneficial, but is there some, or maybe what's the purpose of expressing them if we can feel them without expressing them?
Well, it would come down to the context of the situation and what's important for your growth in that moment. So if you feel like it's beneficial for you to express, let's say, speak your mind, speak your truth.
Yeah, yeah.
That is an example of living from heart-centered consciousness because you are living from a level of authenticity. You're saying, this is my truth in this moment. Typically in the past, I might have repressed this and just stayed quiet because of for fear of maybe triggering you or something like that, or being judged or what have you. But now I feel courageous to share this. What you're doing is you're taking that darkness. I think of it as darkness. We've got light and we've got the absence of light. And so lower emotion is an expression of darkness energy. And so you're taking that and you're bringing it into the light of your heart, your authenticity, and saying, I'm going to express this out. Now, as we become more conscious, we become more emotionally calibrated and better able to express ourselves while being emotionally stable.
Yeah, I agree. So how to one thing that I was thinking about as you were speaking about emotions was the shame. Because I think shame can be so paralyzing where, let's say, even like with shame versus guilt I associate less with being like paralyzed. With shame I literally feel like you're closed off, you're kind of like stuck, you don't want to be seen. And I have experienced like a lot of shame in the past where it literally would paralyze me, like to the point where like it's it's interesting because like when I look back, I had like some clips or some conversations that I have had on podcasts where I'm like, I have, if I think about how much growth I have missed out because of the shame or limits I put on myself, it's like, whoa, there's so many things that, or like there were so many kind of glass ceilings that I had put on myself where if I look back now where I am, I didn't, it's really, which is also like another topic that I wanted to touch on, is that self-perception of, I didn't see how capable I was. I didn't see all the good things that now I look back and I'm like, wow, I was like, one example is the basketball. Out of insecurity, I started to wake up at 5 a.m. when I was like 12 years old. I would do my own workouts before school. Throughout the year, winter, rain, doesn't matter. I was out there. And I got to the point where I would play all game and I didn't get tired. I was just having fun. And I was pretty much like one of the top players in my team. And then I got selected to go for national team tryouts. And because of my beliefs, I didn't even try. I was like, I'm not gonna get in anyways. That was my belief or my self perception of myself, which wasn't reflected in reality. In reality, I was probably one of the top like people to actually get in the team. But because I didn't even try, I wasn't like, it was instantly that I had this. I usually explain it as, if I saw any likelihood of me winning or losing, I won't do it. Even if it was like tiniest chance, I'm like, I'm not gonna do it. So it
Hmm.
was, a lot of it was shame. It was limiting so many, also what you said at the beginning, decisions. So many decisions were based because of the shame I felt, or kind of wanting to shy away from maybe feeling more shame. How to, if there's, not if, I think a lot of us, we still might have experiences of shame, even though I think it does change where it's like way less. It's a really interesting place to be. It's like uncommon not to feel, it's like unfamiliar to go from feeling a lot of shame to like where shame is kind of like, it's not the common thing. But how to maybe start that journey to move, or what actually can help with going from, even like with the chart, is it it's shame and then the next one is guilt, then it's apathy, grief, fear. How to move up from shame?
Yeah. I'm going to give you the same answer as I gave you in a previous one, which is just to begin to accept. So think of it as you can have a like a quantum jump, a leap from something like shame all the way into empowerment, courage. Uh, and the way to getting there may be different for everyone, but as soon as you start to make the choice that you want to release that level of emotion. You're already beginning to unravel it. You're already beginning to reduce the momentum of the shame that you have been creating, right? So think of it like any of these levels are results that you're creating. They're just things that you're creating. And the moment that you decide to create something different, you're starting to release the energy of that shame. And you don't have to go right into guilt from shame. You don't have to do it step by step. You can go from shame into courage.
One thing that I did identify in myself is, and it partly also was reading a bit more Brene Brown stuff. Um, Shame loves isolation,
Yes.
and and it's interesting that every time when I either face it or I speak it, it's kind of like it vanishes. For it to be alive, it kind of needs to isolate you from everybody. It needs to stay within you. But then the moment you let it out, even if it's like, this might be a stupid thought, but this is what I'm thinking. I have a good example actually. With my first half marathon, I was like chubby. I wasn't in good shape when I was training for it. And the whole time I was like, why is nobody telling me this? This being like, aren't you too fat to run half marathon? That was my thought. And and once I finished it, and nobody really like said anything, they're like, "Oh wow, that's so great," that kind of stuff. And once I finished it, I think it was a few weeks later, me and my friend we were at the gym, and I was telling her like, "I have this one question though." And she's like, "What is it?" I'm like, "All this time when I was training, I thought that somebody will ask me, 'Aren't you too fat to do this?'" And and she was like, it didn't even cross my mind. For me, what I thought was she's probably going to be busy because it's not a small feat. The the other person that I shared it with said that my first thought was I could never do that. And I was like, really? Okay, interesting. But if I didn't voice it, if I didn't communicate it, I don't think my shame was as strong at that time because I have done enough of those conversations, but it probably still was there. And once I communicated, I got this like feedback. I was like, gone. Even that thought, it's gone. And but it can feel so hard to actually voice it or put it in light because it feels
Mm,
like the barrier to do that is so big. It seems
mhm.
it seems enormous. Is there anything that can help with that?
Help with bringing.
Kind of like, yeah, either facing it or communicating it or letting it out,
Mhm.
where in my experience that has happened with pretty high percentage of like that's what happens is the moment I let it out, the moment I share it with somebody, it literally vanishes.
So you let that out in the moment that you did because for whatever reason you were ready to.
Mm,
And like I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with experiencing any of these levels or emotions. They provide us with teaching. And when someone has the inner realization that they've learned the lesson of whatever that emotion is, they'll move on. They'll transcend that emotion. They'll transcend that pattern. So it's not really until one is ready internally to let that out. That's why we're never trying to force anyone to change or let it out until they're ready. The only question is when will they be ready? And that's up to them to say, I'm done learning from this teacher. I've learned all that I can from the experience of it. So we don't even have to try and um, oftentimes initiate
mm.
that release because we can't initiate something within someone who's not ready for the initiation. It's really just up to that individual.
Then the follow-up question there I have, what or how to learn, like you said, you learn from it and then you're kind of ready. How to learn from especially the lower emotions. when it's like, I want to be out of here.
Yeah. Well, when we see ourselves as creating the shame, actually, I'll go a step back there because we don't know that usually when we're the ones creating it, right? We think we're the victim of the experience. Like, why? I guess I deserve this shame, and so on. We learn through experience. That's how we learn, through our own direct personal experience of something. And so it's like you have to keep banging your head against the wall until you realize that I'm the one banging my head against the wall. And if I want it to stop hurting, all I have to do is stop banging my head against the wall.
Yeah.
So I've been experiencing this shame. Have I exhausted this shame? Am I tired of shame? We get to a point at which we just suddenly go, enough is enough. I don't want to experience this anymore. I don't want to. I'm now I'm now done with what I've been experiencing. And that is like the very beginning of the recognition that I'm responsible for change. I may not at that point realize that I was creating the shame, but I've reached a point of feeling done with the experience of shame. And in that moment of recognition, you've had a paradigm shift. And now you're calling in the release of that shame.
Yeah, it's something that I had this realization. I remember like I was on a walk and I was like, maybe I'm circling back to this situation because I haven't learned the lesson yet, or I haven't learned whatever I need to learn within this specific like setup or like repetitive thing that keeps happening. And something about that realization was gave that like relief about it, instead of being like, oh, I'm here again. It was more like, oh, maybe there's a lesson that I haven't learned yet, that I need to learn within this stage that I'm at, that maybe at other stages I wouldn't be able to learn. And it might be some level of acceptance that comes with that, but it I think it feels hard to accept at those lower stages because of the also partly because it feels bad, or like it doesn't feel as uplifting or positive in that moment.
Mhm.
um I'm even like curious, why is that kind of on purpose that you go from like lower one to higher one, where the lower one feels shittier, and that's where there might be like many hard lessons that maybe get you ready for the positives or appreciating them, because it seems like it is like you naturally wants to go from lower to higher, but a lot of times we do start at the lower.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, interesting. How would
Mhm.
you define self mastery?
I would define self mastery as the choice to use your life, to live your life in such a way that results in the embodiment of your higher self.
And what is higher self?
Your higher self is your true essence, your true nature. It really is the Christ self. It's what we saw Jesus embodying and others, right? Buddha, Krishna, and others that are now known as ascended masters. And so your higher self is your true Christed nature.
How do you find it? How do you connect with it? Knowing, I assume we all have it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that probably is loaded question, but
It's a great question. It's right here. So you've heard probably of this ascension process we're going through of 3D to 5D, this great awakening. It's called by many different names. And it's really just a phase that humanity is going through where we have learned to be living from our lower self or the ego mind, our emotional self, and going into heart-centered consciousness, where we end this continuous experience of separation and we go into a process or an experience of unification. And the more we're living from heart centered consciousness, we're living from a higher consciousness, which is closer to the truth of our true nature, which we could call our higher self, our spiritual nature.
So the goal essentially is to get as close as you can or meet that higher self level. How to know if you're getting there, if you're moving there, if you're aligned on the path to get there? If maybe you're in a place where I don't even know what is it, what is that higher self? I'm actually going in the right direction. What's the situation?
Yeah, good question. Am I loving more often
Hmm.
or not?
That's it.
Think of it as a baseline.
Yeah.
A baseline. What's my baseline? What is the way in which I'm consistently operating in my life? Is it
Hmm.
from a place of unification, of compassion, of acceptance, of love, or is it not?
And based on love, not love. Let's say there's not love. What to do when the answer you get is not love?
Well, it depends what you want to do.
Mm.
So I said before that there's nothing wrong with experiencing any level of consciousness. We're creating everything that we experience so that we can have experience and ask ourselves from a place of experience, firsthand experience, do I want more of this? Do I want to experience myself as shameful, guilty, angry, prideful, etc.? More. Do I want more of that or do I not? Do I want to create something new? I won't know that. I won't be clear on what I want to create until I have the experience. So that's why we come here, to use our free will freely. That's why none of it's wrong. If it was judged how we used it, it would not be free. So we're here to use it freely, gain personal experience, and go, now I know what I want more of and what I want less of.
With experience being the, let's say, the main objective, why does experiencing and doing a lot of times feel so hard versus not doing?
Because of our resistance to what we experience.
Mm.
It's only hard when we choose to embody a perspective of it being hard. And that perspective is simply one of resistance, dislike, aversion. The sooner we accept the experience, the sooner we transcend the creation of suffering with that experience and become able to learn the lesson and gain the wisdom that the experience is providing us.
That's actually one thing that I wanted to touch on that I wrote. You had a piece of content about working is hard to seeing it as effortless. Where you also talked about like it's not being passive, because I think a lot of times we can assume effortless as being passive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how maybe you partly answered it with previous answer, but I think a lot of times it is that why does it feel so hard, and how to make it feel not easier but more effortless. Can you talk through that, because I feel like it's something that can be experienced a lot, especially I think with a lot of people who are high performers. They're always like working on stuff or like building stuff, and sometimes it can feel exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Burnout is a really common one, right? Especially for entrepreneurs, like you said, high performers. And so we look at burnout or exhaustion as a creation, an unconscious creation that has been carried through resistance to whatever it is that I've been doing. So that's what makes hard work feel hard. That's why when we're doing a passion, when we're doing something we love, even take for example, like gameplay, playing a game, like literally a game. You play a game because of the joy of playing the game. Yes, there will be checkpoints, there will be achievements, but you're not waiting for the achievement to happen for it to be fun. It's just fun the whole way through. and you enjoy the challenge of missing the achievement, not achieving it. So you can try more the next time. So you can dig in more the next time, focus more the next time. It's the experience, the process itself that is the joy. And so you can play and play and play for hours and sometimes have to be forced to take breaks because you don't want to. So I think that what that teaches us is that if I'm creating exhaustion and burnout, yes, I will need to take a break if I haven't learned how to create a new association with this work. I need to do that because what the exhaustion or burnout is showing me is that the mindset that I'm bringing into this work is what is creating this state of being that is of exhaustion.
I can relate to that playing with the basketball. It doesn't feel like it's work. Even though it is not easy. Plenty of bruises. But something about it is I was thinking about it the other day how when I'm even at the practice, I don't really think about what I need to do or what I need to like what are my to-do list tasks that I need to finish off or whatever might be the case. I'm present in the moment, I'm having fun, I'm playing. And I think it was similar to even like the like 10 years plus ago when I was playing. Um Even though I was kind of like shy, insecure kid on basketball court, I was just having fun for the most part. I was just really enjoying it, which partly was from putting a lot of extra time in the practice. But even that, nobody made me to wake up at 5 a.m. when I was a kid to go out and do my workouts throughout the whole year. It kind of like became my normal, but it even though initially it was driven by like insecurity and shame, but it got me to the place where I was much more able to enjoy it and have fun, where I kept going literally for years with those workouts. And like sometimes my parents would be like, why you need to do that? Like waking up at 5 a.m. kind of like, come on, you're like 12 years old. But it was really interesting to go through that. And even now looking back, for me looking back, it's like that was a lot of hard work. Like I would wake up every day, then I go to school, then I get home, get ready for basketball practice, go to basketball, get home, do homework, go to sleep, repeat again. And I would do it throughout the whole year. Where in summer, it probably would be like 6, 8 hours of training. Like one summer when I didn't go to camps, I literally the whole summer, I'm just training everything 8 hours a day from the moment I'm up until the moment I went to sleep. And now
Yeah.
if I think about it, when I'm training for Ironman or marathon, I'm like, whew, okay, how did I do it then? But at the same time, the more I start to get into that playfulness and looking at it kind of as a game or as a fun thing to do, I feel much less resistance towards doing it. It becomes like more enjoyable. Is there is there something that can help with that perspective shift from seeing it as hard or perceiving it as um, or even thinking about how much work it's gonna take, how many hours it's gonna be, to now looking at it more from that perspective of journey, fun, and effortlessness?
hmm Is there a shift that one can make to help go from outcome oriented to process oriented? Well, I think when you choose to see the way that you identify a win,
Mm,
like what is a win? Yes, a win is when you win the game. Sure, there's a win. But if you don't win that game, close that deal, whatever the goal is, you still grew in some way because you had an experience. So I see it as the choice to change my perspective on what winning is. And if you choose to see it as growth, then what you're going to do is you're going to see yourself growing all the time. You're going to see yourself winning all the time. And you're going to recognize that, damn, all I do is win. I didn't realize it until I had that perspective shift.
I definitely can see that, how that can work. Is there something that can get in a way of that shift, of seeing it as long as I'm growing, I'm winning?
Yeah, being hard on yourself.
Hmm.
No, I only can grow and win this way. The only, it's
And
like before you
stubbornness.
said, right? Your example of, I wouldn't put myself in situations where I thought I might lose. It's like, okay, what you did in that moment, what the ego did, the conditioning did, not you, but the conditioning. It's the ego conditioning that does is out of fear. It says, we only want to, and it's control because the ego controls. We want to control the environment so that I only go to environments in which I'm going to have this one predictable outcome because I fear experiencing anything other than that result. So now if I go, actually, I choose to adopt a new mindset, a new understanding of what winning is, then what you're doing is you're actually breaking down that mindset that you had previously that was of control and fear. And what you're doing is you're being kinder to yourself. And you're going like, I actually, what I want, my drive is to grow. So because my drive is to grow, my mindset that's forming is one that is going to look for signs of growth everywhere.
I wanted to touch on the importance of, if there is any, with the compassion and self-compassion. Can you talk a bit more on that?
Compassion and self-compassion. It's all compassion, whether we are directing it towards ourselves or to someone that we perceive as another. I say
Also,
perceive as another
let's
because they're
start with
just
you.
expressions.
Let's start with you describing what is compassion.
It's heart-centered kindness. It's understanding. It's empathy. It's really what it is. It's empathy. It's saying, yeah, I've been there too. I understand. I felt that way too. And so because I resonate and take responsibility for having felt that way as well, I can have understanding when you are.
What if compassion, or I'm touching on compassion because I have seen that for me, a lot of replacing some judgment or criticism towards myself with more like compassion, understanding, empathy. It has helped a lot with, in many ways, I feel like it has sped up a lot of my growth. But also, I think compassion can be perceived as weak. That it's you're being a sissy if you're compassionate. That, especially, I think if we're talking about men, it's less so with women. How to be more compassionate if you have some resentment or negative associations with compassion?
Yeah, it's a great point that you bring up. What is a win to the spirit is a loss to the ego.
Hmm.
And so even though I may have been taught, I may have learned, I may have been conditioned to see compassion as like one thing, therefore it's not for men because yeah, it's girly, it's feminine. Maybe that's not the whole truth. It is an aspect of the divine feminine. Yes, it is. But we, male and female, embody both masculine and feminine. And so to just assume that anything that is of feminine energy is girly is an inaccurate understanding of what masculine feminine polarity is in the first place. So to embody love as a way of being is a win for the spirit. And just look at we've talked about the map briefly of consciousness. It's at the level of power, not force. So it is of spiritual strength. But to the ego, which is of fear, of control, it will not perceive reality. It will see it as weakness. And why? Because compassion marks the death of the ego. So it does not want you to like compassion. It does not want you
Hmm.
to value compassion because it means its death.
Is there a way to shift perspective towards it?
Is it right to shift?
Or like, is
perspective
there a
towards it,
way? Is there a way to do that?
to shift one's perspective of compassion. Yeah, I think what I just shared is a perspective shift. It's to perceive what compassion is from truth, to say it's a win. It is a win. Oh, I see that perspective that I had of compassion and love, forgiveness is just a trick of the ego. It's the ego conditioning that thought it was weakness.
Hmm. All right, the last question that I have for you, since we managed to talk through a lot of stuff, what is the impossible that you're chasing now?
Good question. Continuous transformation and self mastery,
Hmm.
which I have learned over the years is not only possible, but natural.
Ooh, can you expand on that?
Enlightenment is your natural state of being. It is only the ego mind that places spirituality and enlightenment on a pedestal, because spirituality and enlightenment is not of the ego itself. So, enlightenment, although it has been statistically rare throughout human history, is natural.
Hmm.
And it is going to become more and more prevalent in numbers. It's going to be experienced as more natural as more people walk the pathway of self mastery.
I love that. If people want to learn more about you, find you, connect with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, on socials right now is the best place. So, Mr. Zack Michael, that handle across socials,
Okay.
YouTube, Instagram, and so on.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. This was really, really fun, value packed for sure. Conversation. I'm sure that anybody listening will have at least one golden nugget to take away
Oh,
from it.
awesome. Awesome. I hope so. Thank you so much, Astra, as well.